30 years of charging, 30 years of fundraising, 30 years of being at the forefront of protecting and saving Kenya's mountain water towers. 2018 would mark the 30th anniversary of the annual Rhino Charge, a 4x4 off-road challenge through some of the toughest and wildest terrain Kenya has to offer. It's a combination of bravery, driving skills, navigation, and a certain amount of luck that draws teams back every year in search of glory. The ultimate prize is knowing that this is the culmination of another year of fundraising for the Rhino Arc Charitable Trust, the organisation entrusted to use these funds to protect not just the mountain ecosystems, but the communities that live alongside them. From its humble beginnings in 1989, the event has grown in size and stature to become one of the most popular fixtures on the annual motorsport calendar, with 14 teams having participated in 20 or more events. Alan McKittrick, who has competed in every event to date and has raised over $1 million, sits on the board of directors of Rhino Arc. He took his first of 4 victories in 1999, with his most recent win in 2016. He's been the highest fundraiser on 15 events, an incredible record and personal contribution to the Rhino Charge. Despite being an octogenarian, Jazz Semi, a veteran of 27 charges, still competes in his unchanged Willys Jeep.
Since 1989, I'm there to raise that money so that this all mountain towers are complete with the fence, and the animals are free, the farmers are happy, and that's how it is going.
The wonderful Girls in Pearls, led by Teresa Sapia, have completed on 22 events and continue to be a crowd favourite in their little Series 1 Land Rover. Manny Choda is still chasing his first win after 27 attempts and will be hoping the 30th anniversary will bring a change of fortune for the team. Mark Tilbury has done 20 events and is another competitor who has consistently been among the top fundraisers and top competitors in the unmodified class. As well as teams, some of the cars have also competed since the early days, modified and upgraded, but still with the same spirit. The Rogue Rover was built by John Fall in the early 90s and is now in the capable hands of grandson Sean Miller. Over the last 30 years, the Rhino Arc's contribution to conservation in Kenya has been highly significant. What started as a dream to fence a small part of the Aberdare Mountains to protect rhinos in the salient area has become a countrywide campaign to protect the last remaining mountain and forest ecosystems. In 2009, a fence around the entire Aberdare Mountains was completed, stretching over 400 kilometres. Since then, 620 kilometres of fence have been completed in projects on Mount Kenya, the Iburu and Mau forest complexes. These fences not only protect the forest and wildlife within, but serve as a barrier to protect the communities from marauding elephants and other wildlife that destroy crops and livelihoods. Farmers are now able to live in peace and harmony with their forest neighbours, and children can walk safely to school. Education is the key to the long-term future of these mountain ecosystems. Rhino Arc, in partnership with the Kenya Forest Service, KWS and the private sector, have implemented a conservation curricula in 32 primary and secondary schools around Mount Iberu. Children are at the heart of tree planting and forest regeneration projects, and by doing this, they see firsthand the benefits of conserving these vital water sources. Rhino Arc is committed to making the Rhino Charge climate neutral, offsetting the CO2 emissions relating to the event by purchasing corresponding amounts of carbon credit on the market. To celebrate its 30th anniversary, multi-purpose flasks were given to every person entering the venue, dramatically reducing the plastic waste associated with one-use plastic bottles. All refuse is collected, sorted and removed from site after every event. Each year, the Rhino Charge moves location to reduce its impact on the environment and to support local community-run conservancies through the landowner's access fee, local employment before and during the event, and community projects overseen by Rhino Arc after the event. In 2017, the event had taken place on the slopes of Mount Marsabit in Kenya's arid north. HQ had been on the edge of the Gofbongoli crater, and the charge, labelled the Upside Down Charge, had been an incredibly hard challenge, with steep-sided gorges separating the various guard posts. Victory had gone to the sole finisher, the smiling Shenzis, who finished with just minutes to spare. In 2018, the charge was run in the Elangata Enteret Enkutoto Group Ranch, to the east of the world-famous Masai Mara Game Reserve. Through the LAF, the community received 4.5 million shillings from fees charged to all cars entering the venue.
Thank you.
As crews made their way across the beautiful plains towards check-in, they got a first glimpse of the spectacular scenery that awaited them. This year's event would be the shortest crowfly distance in the history of the charge. It would be a challenging combination of steep-sided hills and river valleys. Heavy rains countrywide meant the bush was lush and thick, spectacular to behold, but a real challenge to navigate. The charge is accessed by prepaid ticket holders only, and the venue HQ is carefully laid out with fixed campsites and strict rules regarding waste management. The day before the event, scrutineering takes place where teams get a chance to catch up, show off their latest modifications and upgrades, and reminisce about the previous years. For the organisers, strict rules regarding the weight of the car, tyre size and safety regulations are enforced. The GPS tracking units are carefully checked, and these not only record the exact distances the cars do, but they are a vital tracking system to ensure the competitors' safety on the day. We had a chance to catch up with some of these crews as the excitement began to build.
It looks pretty rough. We had a look up at the hills yesterday coming in. We'd broken down and we're dragging the charge car in, and one of our runners was looking up at one of these huge ravines up at the side there and saw a tent up on top, and we said, surely not. And it actually turns out it's a checkpoint, so yeah, it looks like it's going to be a very hard charge.
The main reason I do it is to raise funds for conservation. So consistently every year I try and raise a lot of funds. Over the last few years I've been amongst the top fundraisers. And again this year I aim to be amongst one of the highest fundraisers, so I hope I make it.
Yes, no, we've managed to get the Coupe de Dames quite a few times, but actually right now our ambition is to go even a little bit beyond that. So we're still aiming high, and we're still hoping to knock some of the men, which we have done really well in the last few years. We've done quite well. We've done top 10 finishes, and so we know we've got it.
It starts this evening at 5 o'clock. From there on, all the tension comes in and we start planning, the arguments and everything. But in the morning, once we get out in the morning, that's it. Yeah, and we have one mission, which is to complete. Yeah.
Getting round is always a positive, and a top 10 placing would be fantastic. But I think realistically, at our age, and the car being very, very mildly modified, yeah, if we get round, we'll be pleased.
The evening drivers' briefing took place led by clerk of the course David Lowe, using the vantage point of his Land Rover bonnet to address the crowd. A new rule this year was introduced which would limit the amount of roads the competitors could use during the event.
But it's fairly simple. All of you get 5 kilometers of free road mileage, okay? For 5K, you can use the roads. After that, the next 5 kilometers, so from kilometer 5 through to 10, you're going to be penalized meter for meter. So every meter you do, we add a meter. At 10 kilometers, you lose a checkpoint. The process repeats in increments of 5 kilometers, and you can lose a maximum of 5 checkpoints.
The aim of this rule was to get competitors back to the original principle of the event. Reach as many guard posts as possible, in the straightest line, with the shortest distance, in just 10 hours. Finally, the competitors collected their maps and headed back to camp to plot their routes and plan their strategy for tackling the terrain in the straightest line possible. Each team is designated a start guard post, randomly selected, which in itself will dictate many of the decisions the teams will have to make. The early pathfinders will struggle for hours to carve their way to the next guard post, which by the afternoon could become a clear track for their rivals to follow, with considerably more ease. On June the 2nd, 2018, the day of the 30th annual Rhino Charge dawned bright and clear, as the teams lined up at check-in before heading out to their respective guard posts. As they arrived for the 7:30 start, the teams got a first glimpse of the terrain ahead, a last chance to rethink their strategy, and for the wise, a chance to take on some fuel for the grueling day ahead. We begin the day at the Copycat Guard Post, one of the hilltop locations where crews were able to see both Hardy and Greensteads, tantalisingly close across the valleys. Having spent most of 2017 at the bottom of a gorge with a broken winch, Team Batuk had done some modifications which they hoped would improve their chances.
We've changed the engine. Last year the engine wasn't powerful enough, so we've stuck a V8 in there now, and we've uprated the winches because last year we snapped them both because the engine wasn't powerful enough. So
I think anti-clockwise some of the bigger cars will do, but we've got a little one, so we're leaving the roads to the end.
and we're going to need all 5Ks of the road.
Very steep.
Yes. See you later.
Challenging gorges. And a lot of big bush forest, and but once we get in there, then we'll decide exactly what we want to do.
Okay.
As the countdown sounded for the 7:30 start, the Danes were quickly off, not wanting to waste precious time. They headed in the direction of Hardy, descending through the thick bush and crossing several gullies on the way. After crossing the river, they went left to Greensteads, taking a route which was a long way off the straight line. Team Hoosie, sporting a new, more powerful winch, would be the early pathfinders from Copycat to Greensteads. Despite blazing the trail, they would set the second shortest sector distance. 17 and 55 were hot on their heels, but struggling more with their smaller tyres. It soon became evident that the steep hills were covered with loose boulders, which acted like marbles, adding to the challenging descent. Watch as Team Rouge attempt to traverse the slope. Without the benefit of a rear winch, not allowed in the rules for unmodified cars, they'd be forced to avoid some of the steeper inclines done by other teams. Team Gumtree followed a similar route as 17 as they headed towards Greensteads. Team Batuk would have to get the winch out early, as the loose stones meant traction was hard to come by, at the start of what was going to be an interesting day for this team. First to arrive at Copycat were the 2017 defending champions, the Smiling Shenzis, once again in a car generously lent to them by Alan McKittrick. They had started at Sitao, broken their windscreen 50 metres from the start, and were heading in a clockwise direction towards Greensteads. Making light work of the descent, they won the sector and were off to a good start.
Two of us are going to run there, check it out. It'll probably take us, 20 minutes. And two guys are going to check this out, so we're keen. But we reckon this is sort of a really critical bit of the Rhino Charge. Guys who drop off here and complete will probably do well if they can, so it's pretty critical.
Starting at Vineyard, the Bundu Fundis, who are always in the hunt for overall victory. They'd spend almost an hour scouting their route before even moving their car. They would pioneer a route to Sitao using the rear winch that no one else would follow. They won the sector by 600 metres, but would have to spend the rest of the day trying to recover time whilst remaining true to the straight line philosophy. Having started at Slater, Team 48 found a cattle track up to Vineyard, opening a route that would not be beaten, taking the Tiger Line victory in the process. They then chose to drop off the nose of the hill at Vineyard, which proved faster, dropping 100 metres on the rear winch in the process. At the bottom, they were forced to do 1 kilometre on the road to avoid driving through farms, but the day was off to an impressive start. Asit Patel of Team 26 also took a precarious line off Vineyard as they headed in the direction of Copycat, which would cost them almost 3 hours. But they were definitely contenders for the Lunatic Award. They would end up in trouble again as they descended off the hill from Copycat to Satao. As the cars arrived at Toolcraft to begin their day, Team 23 were already in trouble. A hole had appeared in the radiator and they were forced to repair it before they could begin.
So here we are, we've got a hole in our radiator, we haven't started yet. So we're taking extra water on in case we need to fill up on the way around.
After several attempts at repair, a raw egg finally got them on their way. The magnet chargers would head off but would have a difficult day, eventually only making it to 4 guard posts. Likewise, the Internationals headed off full of confidence in their Land Rover 101, but would only visit 1 guard post. On their second leg, they would end up on their side, and the resulting complications would end their charge. 34 made their way towards Slater on a similar heading to the magnet chargers. Opening the route, they had managed the 9th shortest sector distance. Former winners, Team KTM, led by Ian Duncan, started from Toolcraft and headed to Highlands. Never shy to go straight, and despite being the pathfinder, they would set the 3rd shortest distance, getting their charge off to a great start. Runners form an integral part of the charge, searching for the best route for their mount, giving direction and hopefully finding the straightest doable route to the next guard post.
Edward, there's some big trees right here, so you might have to weave a little bit to the left and then come back towards me.
The runners from 30 had successfully guided their car to its first guard post of the day. A quick regroup is always necessary to stay on track after a first taste of the day's terrain.
All I've got is JJ going, this is fun.
Step on it.
Sometimes standing on the roof is the only way to see over the bush as crews try to find their bearings. After a difficult event in 2017, Team Choms were back, more determined and better prepared. They were making good time as they crashed their way through the bush. Sometimes the runners go too far ahead and have to wait for the car to find its way through the thick bush.
Has everybody fallen asleep? Okay, we'll blow our whistle.
You need to guide them off that tree, guy.
Mark Tilbury, in his trusty unmodified Land Cruiser, was determined to go as straight as possible. After having to use the roads for most of the event in 2017, he was relishing the chance to charge again. Team 40 were moving quickly but efficiently. Determined to reach all 13 guard posts, they were finding the balance between going straight and keeping on schedule. The Bush Babes were making their way through the bush, always a threat to their male rivals. They weren't about to deviate from the straight line either, as they made their way to Hardy. Situated between 2 rivers, Hardy could be seen from the hilltops, but would prove a challenge to get to. The distinctive hissing sound of the little Land Rover of Team Bigfoot announced its arrival at the river crossing. They'd broken a shock on the very first sector, but were not about to call it a day. Brandon Barber, in his long-legged Suzuki, left Hardy in somewhat of a hurry. Slightly distracted, he ploughed into a large rock which dislodged it, and the car fell unceremoniously onto its side. The crew emerged unscathed and quickly righted the vehicle before heading off again. The Laughing Hyenas arrived at Hardy in high spirits and enjoying the morning so far. Team 52 received some encouragement from 17 as the teams lined up to cross the river. The girls in pearls attempted the river crossing, leaving Hardy, but the slippery bank was too much for the old Land Rover. Fortunately for them, a brigade of Team 48 supporters were on hand to pull them out. "22 made light work of the climb out of Hardy as they headed towards Brook House. Across the valley, teams 49 and 26 found themselves in close company.
You know, they said in briefing, you can go straight. Hey, we've tried, but do not joke. We always try.
The Braeburn Sevens had chosen a difficult line to drop off the hill from Copycat to Satao. Unable to turn around, they were forced to follow a gully all the way down. To add insult to injury, they were then forced to follow the river to avoid crossing into a farm, which would have effectively ended their chance of victory. Jazz Semi is never one to avoid the straight line in his trusty Jeep, but was caught out on this occasion. Some clever winch work righted the car and they too resumed their charge. Team 25 lost 2 hours before the start when their car refused to wake up. Eventually getting going, they would still manage to reach 11 guard posts. They stopped to help other teams along the way and in doing so won the Rob Coombs Spirit of the Charge Award and finished 11th overall. Amazing effort from this team. This year's gauntlet between Highlands, Auto Express and KWS was only 300 metres long, but crews would need to navigate the rocky riverbed and deep pools if they wanted to avoid the stiff penalties. Extra mileage is calculated by a factor of 10, so every metre is critical. The Frying Squad were one of the first teams to tackle the gauntlet early on in the day. They'd started at Slater and decided to head straight there, unlike Team 48. They'd later lose 3 hours when the wiring harness caught fire. In the opposite direction, car 45 made good progress as they weaved their way along the rocky riverbed between Highlands and Auto Express. This would prove to be the easier direction and most popular. We caught up with the KTM cruisers as they were completing the leg from Toolcraft, dropping down the steep hill. They were lucky to get away when the tree they were using to winch followed them down the hill. They were then forced to change a flat tyre before tackling the gauntlet. Team Douglas showed off their modified patrol's ability as they successfully negotiated the riverbed to the amusement of local Maasai warriors. Later they broke the portal box and became stranded in the bush, ending their charge. The real adventure was trying to get the car home again. Team Motomoto were only 20 metres off the winning distance, a job well done on the gauntlet, but with Slater just a short distance away on the Crowfly, they had baffled the organisers when they'd taken a 2-kilometre detour to reach Highlands, winning them the Garmin MMBA award. For the unmodified cars without the benefit of big tyres and long suspension travel, the riverbed was a much more serious challenge. The magnet chargers got through the rocky section confidently, but would get overambitious and ended up bogged down in a river pool. By midday, the pressures are starting to mount. Crews who focused on going straight in the morning suddenly find themselves behind on time. Panic begins to set in, and the once leisurely stops become a quick dash to drink and run.
We started at Hardy, Brookhouse, Greensteads, Little Red, and now Satal. So we're now going for the 6th. But
Straight all the way?
1:45, so I hope it opens up a bit. It's just trees and rocks so far.
It's always fun to ride on board with teams, and we're grateful that they share these clips with the film crew. The Wait a Bit Warriors were also making good progress. They took an incredible line between Sandstorm and Little Red, winning them the Tiger line. On board, you can see what it takes to go that straight through thick bush. As the day progressed, smashed windscreens were worn like a badge of Rhino Charge honour. We catch up with the unmodified Team Rouge and ride on board as they tackle the dense bush, make their way through rivers and across rocky riverbeds, in doing so staying as true as possible to the straight line. The cementers were making their way towards Satal after a myriad of problems that would mean that they only made it to 2 checkpoints and drove 6.4 kilometres. John Cagnali in the mighty Unimog was once again having plenty of fun, powering his way up to Copycat. After a quick stop to take on some much-needed refreshments, they were soon on their way, dropping down to Greensteads. Team 23's radiator was still holding water, and despite a few other issues, they were still smiling.
We put 2 raw eggs in the radiator, and they have cooked, and as they sink down and go out, they block the hole. It's ingenious.
Leaving Copycat, they headed down the now well-used tracks to Greensteads. The McKittrick team were quietly going about their business, calm in the knowledge that they were on schedule and on point. But it hadn't all been this easy. They'd lost time when a stick dislodged the gear selector, and they lost nearly an hour before getting going again. Team 65's Gremlins had struck again, and they had only completed a few kilometres as the hours trickled by.
Yeah, we lost our brake. So we snapped one of our brakes. And then, yeah, one of our winches, the switch for the winch just fired up a bit. So.
By the afternoon, the traffic was building up at the Gauntlet, with several cars stuck and blocking the way, forcing other teams to find a way round. Teams would have to be patient as they watched the time tick away. Team Oli Choda would have to find their way around several cars, pushing them off the straight line. They were one of the few teams to go anti-clockwise around the route, and as such were battling the big hills in the opposite direction to their main rivals, which proved costly. They'd eventually finish the day in 9th overall. The Bundu Fundis were focused on avoiding traffic and climbing out of the river to get through, costing them 30 metres, which became 300 with the applied penalties. Team 48 attacked the Gauntlet late in the afternoon and were lucky to get through after discovering they'd lost all but 3 of the bolts on the front right tractor joint. They borrowed bolts from the other joints and were soon back on their way. The Pink Horns had been hoping to win the Coup de Dame award, but only made it to 6 checkpoints. On only their 2nd charge, they still have some experience to gain, but will be back next year to challenge again. In contrast, the South Africans were having a good day until the Gauntlet. They would lose time assisting the magnet chargers, who were blocking their route into KWS, having lost their 4-wheel drive and bent the steering rod. They made it to 10 guard posts and finished 15th. Another veteran of 22 Rhino Charges, Mahesh Bhatti, had also hit trouble, losing a lot of time stuck between Slater and Highlands. The engine seized, leaving them stranded on a drop with no drive. It would take 2 hours to get going again and make it to the gauntlet. The Aberdare Devils would find this particular hole a challenge to get out of, to the delight of the crowds who cheered them on. After several attempts, they succeeded, to well-deserved applause. The King 21s hadn't had the best day out, visiting just 8 controls, and would have to bow down to their teammates, the Bush Babes, who beat them by 1 place. After a difficult day, which included rolling onto their side and a massive oil leak, Team AK-44 flew down the gauntlet in 11 minutes, seemingly to float over the massive boulders, and going so straight they would take victory on the gauntlet in spectacular fashion. Don White's team might be forgiven for thinking their charge was over after ripping off a front wheel shortly after the gauntlet, but determined not to raise the yellow flag, they managed to rebuild the wheel assembly and charged on. Amazingly, they reached 12 checkpoints and were rewarded with 6th overall. The young Bundu bandits had chosen to start the event without a spare wheel. They'd never had a puncher before, so decided to give their crew more space. It proved to be an expensive mistake, as they got stranded at Greensteads with a puncher and had to wait for a supporter car to bring them a spare wheel. They'd make up for it by finishing 4th on the gauntlet and 10th overall. After spending much of 2017 stranded at the bottom of a gorge, Team 61, seen here successfully negotiating one of the many river crossings, had a much better event. The usual little problems like broken brake pipes not dampening their spirits. Team Choms also made a big step on their previous year's result, making it to 10 guard posts and finishing 14th overall. Car 57 made it to all 13 guard posts after following the same route as 48 off the Vineyard Hill and racing up to Copycat on a flat tyre, finishing with minutes to spare. Unfortunately, to make time up, they'd used 7 kilometres of road, which meant they were penalised 1 guard post, dropping them to 7th.
The final checkpoint.
Okay, we tried to say you're
It was tough. It was tough.
The Roving Rogues paid a fitting tribute to John Fall, who sadly passed away just before the event, by bringing the car he built home in 5th overall. They'd avoided the most serious drops and climbs and were forced to use the road to make up time, costing them 2.7 kilometres in penalties, but had a great day out and made it to all 13 guard posts. 2017 defending champions, the Smiling Shenzis, once again proved their worth with 4th overall. They lost the rear diff lock when a pipe was ripped off, Gray Cullen struggling all day without a windscreen, but can once again be proud of a great result. In the unmodified class, the Danish team proved dominant, finishing 12th overall and missing out on a top 10 after being deducted 1 guard post for exceeding the road limits. An incredible effort against the big modified machines. 3rd overall and a fitting result for Alan McKittrick, the only competitor to do all 30 events to date. They finished with 40 minutes to spare and might have used the time to go straighter, but after the gear selector issue, hadn't realised they were in the hunt for victory. Alan with his team has won 4 times, raising the highest sponsorship on 15 occasions, and sits on the board of directors of Rhino Arc, where his contribution has been immeasurable. This will be his last event, but Team 5 will be back next year to add to their victory tallies. The Bundu Fundis made it 10 podiums in the last 15 years they've entered, with 2 wins to their credit. Second overall could have been first if they hadn't been fighting to make up time from the first leg. A fuel line leak and puncture on the final leg meant they finished just 2 minutes to spare, but another great result from the team. With 3 wins already, Team 48 took victory on the 2018 Rhino Charge. They once again went straight where few dared to follow. It hadn't been easy. They lost the rear winch when it, along with the rear bumper, was torn off. 140 metres before their final control, the fan belt and power steering belt got pulled off by a Camifora tree, and they finished with just 8 minutes to spare. But another fantastic and well-deserved victory. It had been a long, hot, dusty day, and most teams had found the going tough. The lush bush after so much rain added to the challenge, but then this is the Rhino Charge, and one thing is for certain, it's a lot of fun. Regardless of who wins, there's a sense of pride in being part of this great event, and the incredible funds it raises for conservation, communities and environmental education in Kenya. Prize giving is held the next day, a last chance to gather and salute the event winners and exchange stories from another epic adventure. This year was a special year, as the event marked its 30th anniversary, and it was a chance to recognise not just the competitors, many of whom have done 20+ events, but also the many organisers who volunteer their time and without whom the event would not take place. Such is the dominance of the top 3 that between them they've won 8 of the last 10 events, leaving other competitors wondering what the secret of the Rhino Charge must be.
We all put so much into this whole thing, and to win is just massive, and it really means a lot, and you never really know if you've won or not till 10 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago, and it's really good. It is really good.
The Rhino Charge might be a competition, but its purpose is to raise funds, and highest accolades must go to the top fundraisers who this year astounded everyone by setting a new record. The third highest sponsorship prize went to Team AK44, led by Adil Kawaja. They raised 16,217,000 Kenya shillings. Adil has taken part in 14 events, and this year joins Alan McKittrick and Peter Kinyua on the Rhino Arc Board of Directors. On his final event as a competitor, Alan McKittrick and Team 5 raised 21,030,000 shillings, another fantastic effort from the team that has consistently been at the forefront of fundraising efforts.
Well done, Alan.
The highest sponsorship award this year went to Peter Kinyua and Team 23. They raised an astounding 24,770,681 shillings. This is quite literally 100 times more than the entire charge raised at its first event in 1989.
Our sponsors are the same sponsors. Most of them are the same. This year we got a new one, but I think it's becoming easier and easier, especially when they trust you, and all payments are being made directly to Rhino Arc. So actually, I think we have retained our sponsors over the years, and we're finding that we can find new ones as we move along. It means a lot. I remember I first started charging. I enjoy the charge, so that is what drove me, and from there I moved to fundraising. And actually, if there's anything I can leave for this country, all the people of this country, is conservation, and raising that money and knowing where that money goes is what's important to our team as a whole.
In 2018, Rhino Charge set a new record, raising 181,401,055 shillings. As the crews packed up and made their way home, they can be confident that the Rhino Charge spirit is stronger than ever. The event will continue to be one of the greatest single fundraising events in Kenya. Rhino Arc, with its strong leadership, will continue the hard work of the last 30 years as it moves forward with new projects in the Mau Forest Complex, as well as maintenance and completion of the Aberdare, Eburu and Mount Kenya fences. The benefit to communities and conservation alike will continue to leave its mark on the lives of every Kenyan for generations to come. 2018 also saw clerk of the course David Lowe step down after 6 years at the helm.
There are two events which are my favourites, and it's a little bit early right now to know which one would come out tops. The 2013, my first charge, and 2018, my last charge. I think between those two, those are my two favourites. Yeah, I mean, this charge has been a real charge. Short, you know, and we caught a few people out. Roads rule is in place, it's worked. If you look at the results, you'll see it's done its job, which means we got it right. And I think people appreciate what we're trying to do. We're trying to put people back off the roads, you know, get back in the bush. We had no speeding penalties this year. You know, first time ever. The reason we had no speeding penalties is because guys weren't on the roads. You know, so it worked. It's good. We're heading in the right direction.
He hands off to Don White, team leader of Car 1, whose experience as a competitor means the event is in safe hands. And you can be sure that the 2019 Rhino Charge, wherever it may be, will be another epic adventure. We'll see you there.